A lot of people are searching for meaning. They read books about purpose. They watch videos about purpose and listen to podcasts about purpose. And they keep asking the same question. What am I supposed to do with my life? But what if that is the wrong question? What if meaning is not something you find? What if meaning is something you carry? Because when you look closely at the people who often report the strongest sense of purpose, they usually have one thing in common: responsibility. Someone depends on them. Something depends on them. There's a burden that they have chosen to carry. And that's not a coincidence. Because meaning rarely appears first. Responsibility usually comes first, and then meaning grows around it. The modern world encourages people to chase freedom. There's more options, more comfort, more flexibility. Yet many people who have the most freedom still feel lost. Not because they have too little opportunity, but because they have too little responsibility. Because meaning is rarely found. Meaning is usually carried. And understanding that distinction can change the way you look at your entire life. One of the most common pieces of advice people hear today is find your purpose. And at first, that sounds reasonable. But there is a hidden problem inside that idea, because it encourages people to think of meaning as something waiting to be discovered, almost like a hidden answer, or a destination, a moment of clarity, something that suddenly appears and explains everything. So people begin searching. They change careers. They chase experiences. They read books. They attend seminars. And they spend years asking themselves, what are they supposed to do with their life? And yet many never feel like they have found the answer. Not because they're lazy, not because they're incapable, but because they may be searching for meaning in the wrong place. When you look at people who often describe their lives as being meaningful, a pattern begins to appear. It is a parent raising a child, or a teacher helping students to grow, a business owner serving customers, a caregiver supporting a loved one, a mentor guiding someone who needs direction. Most of these people did not wake up one morning and suddenly discover meaning. Instead, they accepted responsibilities that required something from them. And over time, meaning grew around those responsibilities. That is the mistake many people make. They believe meaning comes first and responsibility follows. But in many cases, responsibility comes first and meaning follows. Freedom is one of the most desired things in modern life. People want freedom over their time, over their work, over their decisions, freedom over how they spend their days. And freedom is valuable, but many people make a mistake. They often assume freedom automatically creates purpose. It does not. Freedom creates options. Responsibility creates direction. Those are not the same thing. Today, many people have more freedom than previous generations ever imagined. They have more choices, more flexibility, more access, more ability to shape their own lives, and yet many still feel uncertain about where they're going. Because options alone do not answer an important question. What should I devote myself to? Freedom allows you to choose, but it does not tell you what is worth choosing. Responsibility begins answering that question. The moment something depends on you, your decisions begin carrying weight. Your time matters differently. Choices matter differently. Your actions matter differently because they affect more than just you. That is why freedom by itself can sometimes feel empty. The absence of restriction is not the same thing as the presence of purpose. Purpose begins to emerge when your actions become connected to something larger than your immediate comfort or preferences. Freedom tells you what you can do. Responsibility tells you what you should do. And that distinction changes everything. Most people do not avoid responsibility because they are weak. They avoid responsibility because responsibility is demanding. It requires consistency. It creates obligations. It limits certain choices. And sometimes it asks for more than what we want to give. That is why responsibility is often described as a burden. But what if the burden is the point? Think about the moments people often describe as the most meaningful periods in their lives. Raising a child, building a business, supporting a spouse, caring for a family member, leading a team, serving a community. Very few of those experiences are easy. Most require sacrifice, patience, commitment, and sustained effort. Yet they are often remembered as some of the most significant experiences a person ever has. Why? Because responsibility creates significance. The moment something depends on you, your actions begin carrying greater weight. Your decisions matter. Your effort matters. Your presence matters. Not because someone declared you important, but because your choices have real consequences. Responsibility connects your actions to something larger than yourself. And when that happens, life begins to feel more meaningful. The weight is not a flaw in responsibility. The weight is the reason it matters. Most people think responsibility changes what they do. But responsibility also changes who they become. Because identity is built through repeated action. Every responsibility you carry consistently becomes evidence about your character. When you show up repeatedly for your family, that becomes evidence. You keeping your commitments, that becomes evidence. When people can depend on you, that becomes evidence. Over time, those actions begin shaping the way you see yourself. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who might follow through. You become someone who does. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who might be dependable. You become someone who is. That transformation does not happen through motivation. It happens through repetition. Showing up, following through, handling what needs to be handled again and again. This is why responsibility often creates a deeper confidence than achievement. Achievement can come from a single moment. Responsibility is built over time. And every responsibility you carry successfully reinforces the same message. I can be counted on. Eventually, that message becomes part of your identity. Responsibility does not just shape your actions, it shapes who you become. In the last episode, we talked about contribution, about how creating value for other people is one of the few things that still creates lasting value in a world of infinite access. And that is true. Contribution matters, but contribution by itself is not the complete answer. Because people can achieve, produce, and succeed and still feel like something is missing. Why? Because contribution by itself creates value. Responsibility gives that value purpose. Contribution answers the question, what can I do? Responsibility answers the question, who am I doing it for? That distinction matters. A person can build a successful business, but when that business supports employees, customers, and families, the work begins carrying a different kind of meaning. The work is no longer connected only to achievement. It is connected to responsibility. And responsibility gives contribution a destination. That is why many people often discover that their deepest sense of meaning is not when they accomplish something for themselves, but when their efforts begin to benefit something larger than themselves. Contribution creates value. Responsibility gives that value purpose. And when those two things come together, life begins to feel far more meaningful than either one alone. At this point, some people may be thinking, that sounds good, but where do I find more meaning? The better question might be, what responsibility have I been avoiding? Because for many people, the next source of meaning is not hidden. It's already visible. It's simply being postponed. Maybe it's that conversation that needs to happen. A commitment that needs your attention. A relationship that needs to be repaired. A skill that needs to be developed. A responsibility that keeps getting pushed into the future. Most people already know what theirs is. The problem is not awareness. The problem is avoidance. Because responsibility often asks us to do things that are uncomfortable. Things that require effort. Things that require consistency. Things that remove excuses. But avoiding responsibility rarely makes life lighter. It usually makes life smaller. This is why your challenge is simple. Within the next 24 hours, identify one responsibility you have been postponing. Not 10, not a complete life overhaul, just one. Then take the first concrete action. Make the phone call. Schedule the appointment. Have that conversation. Create a plan. Begin the work. Take the first step. Because responsibility does not become meaningful after it is completed. It becomes meaningful the moment you decide to carry it. And that decision can happen today. As we move deeper into the age of infinite access, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Technology can make people more capable, but it cannot make them more responsible. AI can provide information. Software can automate tasks. Systems can increase efficiency, but responsibility remains a choice. And that choice is becoming increasingly important. Because capability alone is not enough. A person may be highly skilled, highly intelligent, highly informed, but if others cannot depend on them, something important is missing. Capability makes a person useful. Responsibility makes a person trustworthy. And trust is one of the most valuable resources in any team, family, organization, or community. People trust those who follow through. People trust those who keep commitments. People trust those who carry responsibility without constantly looking for a way to escape it. That is why responsible people often become increasingly valuable over time. Not because they know everything, not because they're perfect, but because others know that they can be counted on. In a world where more tasks become automated and more information becomes available, trust will continue to be more important, not less. Because responsibility is what transformed capability into reliability, and reliability is becoming increasingly rare. The future will not simply reward those who are capable. It will reward the people who others can depend on. People spend years searching for meaning, for purpose, for fulfillment, searching for the thing that will finally make life feel significant. But meaning is rarely something that appears out of nowhere. It is rarely discovered by accident. More often, meaning grows where responsibility is carried. It grows where people commit to something larger than themselves, when they become dependable, when they contribute, when they follow through, when they accept obligations that matter. Because responsibility changes more than behavior. It changes identity. It creates significance. It gives contribution a purpose. And over time, it creates meaning. The modern world offers more freedom, more options, and more access than ever before. But freedom alone does not tell us what matters. Responsibility does. And that may be one of the most important lessons for the future. Meaning is rarely found. Meaning is usually carried. And if you want to stay relevant in a world that offers endless options but very little direction, to become someone who can be counted on, to become someone who willingly carries responsibility, to become someone who people will always matter to, subscribe. This is GB Lewis, and I will see you in the next one.